Good morning, all. Today we're going to be talking about changes and how they can be very difficult. And I'm going to start today with a gospel reading that comes from the parting talks that Jesus had with his disciples just before he was arrested. It contains the image of Jesus as the vine and the disciples as the branches coming off that vine. And God is pictured as the gardener who prunes that vine and so that the branches can bear more fruit. So this is from John 15, verses 1 through 8. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vineyard keeper. He removes any of my branches that don't produce fruit, and he trims any branches that provide fruit so that it will produce even more fruit. You are already trimmed because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. A branch can't produce fruit by itself, but must remain in the vine. Likewise, you can't produce fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, then you will produce much fruit. Without me, you can't do anything. But if you don't remain in me, you will be like a branch that is thrown out and dries up. Those branches are gathered up, thrown into a fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified when you produce much fruit, and in this way prove that you are all my disciples. So, spring is here, right? My daffodils are finally up. They're certainly blooming at the Wadsworth Park quite nicely right now, from what I can see from the pictures. And many people have begun working in their gardens, maybe cleaning up some things from last year, cleaning away the detritus and the dead leaves. And there's another job that gardeners do early each spring, which is pruning. So pruning is removing the unwanted branches from a plant because they have become dead or damaged. And this encourages more growth in the plant. Actually, one of my neighbors I've been chatting with of late about removing a bunch of dead trees that have fallen between our houses. There's all these new little young trees trying to take hold. We can see them out there, these little spruce things about a foot tall. But they don't really have room to grow. So by getting rid of all the fallen trees, that will allow the new trees to grow tall. And it's the same for any individual plant. We prune them to keep them healthy and strong. Put away the branches that were killed by frost or ice and the other healthy branches, allowing other branches to bloom and grow. I used to work at a garden center many, many years ago, and when we planted patience in big bowls or flower boxes for customers, we always pinch off all the flowers that were growing, and it felt so wrong, right? It's like taking all the blooms off the plant. But the result was that all the energy that the plant was absorbing from the sun could now be used to create even more flowers. So you pinch them back a little bit and in the right way, and you allow even more growth and flowers in the plant. Now, in Jesus' day, it was very common for people to have a grapevine growing in their house. Grapevines gave them shade, which is nice, and it also, of course, gave them fruit. And one day, Jesus looked at the grapevine and told his disciples, I am the vine, you are the branches. God is the gardener who waters and prunes the plants, as we just read about. And Jesus said this to his disciples just before he was arrested, because he wanted them to know clearly that they were to be like branches. They were to spread out and carry on his work of teaching about God's love. He also wanted them to keep learning and growing in their faith, and that meant they would need to be willing to change. God would help them make those changes so that God's love could be seen more clearly in the world. Now, some people are afraid of change and don't deal with it very well, and I will say I'm one of those people. I like things to be, pretty much the same all the time. And just like people sometimes worry when a bush or a tree is pruned back. But change is necessary if we are going to grow. And we do that by learning. And this is why we sometimes see the vine and branches in stained glass windows, or on banners or plaques in churches. And it's to remind us that we are called to be like those branches, spreading God's love, and that God will help us change and grow. And that Jesus is always with us. Jesus is that vine that's there, that's giving support and giving strength to us as we branch out. So I'm going to read a story. And give me a second here. And I also have an activity for you today, which is what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm trying to find. But to start with, I will read the story, and this is called The Koala Who Could. In a wonderful place where the day was just dawning, and the breezes blew soft on a warm golden morning, in a place where the creatures ran wild and played free, a koala named Kevin hung to a tree. A nicer gray fellow you never would meet, as soft as a soft thing from ear tufts to feet. His favorite way to relax in the sun was to cling and to nap and to munch a leaf bun. And after all this, he'd need a good rest. Yes, Kevin liked sticking to what he knew best. You see, high up was safe since he liked a slow pace, while the ground down below seemed a frightening place. Too fast and too loud, too big and too strange. Nope, Kevin preferred not to move or to change. So he clung to his tree as he knew what to do and was never too keen to try anything new. So when Wombat stopped by and shouted one day, "Hey, Kevin, why don't you come down here and play?" I think he replied, "I should stay on my plant. I'm busy right now. No, I'm sorry, I can't." "Why not?" cried the Ruse with a super loud cheer. "Yes, why?" cried the Dingoes. "There's nothing to fear." But Kevin, who'd never been one to act fast, said, "I've cleaning to do, but it's nice that you asked." As Kevin sat watching them chatter and stare, a part of them wished he could join them down there. But he knew he'd miss home. It was dark and so late. The whole thing was risky. Adventure could wait. Whatever the invite, he'd always say no. Oh dear, it seemed Kevin just couldn't let go. So his life was the same, no matter the day. The weeks came and went, the weeks rolled away. And Kevin stayed still while the world moved around until he awoke to a worrying sound. Tap, tap, the sound went. Well, this was a blow. Tap, tappity, tap, tap, tap. Oh no! Uncling, the crowd called, which had gathered below. Leap and we'll catch you. Just let yourself go. But Kevin was scared. Let go? No, I shan't. I won't, shouted Kevin. Oh dear, I just can't. Down came the tree, and with it was bringing, with a crash and a wallop, and Kevin still clinging. Kevin, he carefully opened one eye and looked up at the lava staring down from the sky. Kevin, he carefully loosened one paw. He loosened his hold. He felt springy and light and happy and bold. The worst he could think of had now come to pass, and he was just fine. Why, he felt quite first class. So when Wombat leaned over and held out his paw, Kevin no longer felt worry or doubt. When Dingo asked, "Now will you come out to play?" the crowd all joined in with a "What do you say?" And even though this wasn't part of the plan, Kevin replied, "Yes, I think that I can." And Kevin from then on was always "can do," because life can be great when you try something new. I thought that a delightful little story. And it's all of us are like Kevin sometimes, right? Sometimes it's hard to do new things. And I think this is particularly relevant right now because when the pandemic first started, we had to do lots of things that were new and strange, or felt very strange at the time. And now that things are beginning to sort of get back to normal, although it's a different normal than it was before, right? There's going to be a lot of changes again. And we don't know what all those changes are going to be. But hopefully with all these changes that we've had to deal with, we've learned from them and can grow from them. So for your activity, I have a few questions that I want you to answer. And I want maybe, 5 to 10 minutes spent on it. And when you're done, I want you to share them with someone else when you're watching this video with, or share it with your parents. So the questions are, number one, what changes did you have to make when the pandemic started? And what was the most difficult change for you? Think of one thing that was a change you had to make that you found very difficult. Number two, what did you learn during the time of the pandemic? This thing's so different and changing, and you probably learned some things, right, along the way. So what did you learn during the time of the pandemic? The second question. And third, this one's a little more tricky, but give it some thought and see what you come up with. What will have changed for you from before the pandemic and after we slowly begin to return to normal? So how will that normal that we're returning to, how it would be different for you based upon what you have learned? So basically, what did you learn during the pandemic that will make your life a little bit different, or that things you might approach a little bit differently after the pandemic versus before the pandemic? So think about those things a little bit and write your answers down, share with someone else. And that's it for today. So be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and have a super week. Bye.